Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF Everything in That Shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF Everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. We're doing Iron Man 3 today.
Yes, the third Iron Man movie. Good times.
Yeah. It really, like, I know what it crossed $1 billion, right? Like, after the Avengers bump. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's 1.215 billion.
Yeah. Well, that's nice.
I mean,
that's cool. Yeah, it's. I think people mentioned that it is directed by Shane Black.
people have mentioned
by
that.
Drew Pearce, right?
Hmm.
Guy's name, and then he went
Shane
on,
Black and Drew Pearce.
Yeah, Drew Pearce
For sure.
Then did the next Sherlock movie, and he did the All Hail the King thing, which kind of, I think, ruins this movie by being like, no, the Mandarin's real, but I think people like it because it continues the story of, oh, that was just a fake Mandarin. Don't worry, you'll get the real Mandarin one day. But yeah, I think I've always just kind of felt like, oh, that's fine. I don't have strong opinions about Iron Man 3, other than when I saw it, I really liked that twist happened with the Mandarin. I didn't think that's where they were going, because they already like pulled it back, like, oh, he's just filming stuff from a stage. So I thought like, oh, that's the thing. I didn't realize it was like, no, it's all fake. Like, he's not real at all.
Yeah, and that part is just absolutely wonderful to me. Am I let down that the Nine Rings organization doesn't actually exist in that kind of format, in that criminal underground format? Yes, I'm absolutely disappointed. But
to be fair, 10 rings is made for MCU, because he just has 10 rings as the Mandarin.
Yeah.
So 10 rings still exists. It's very real.
Yes, it does.
It's not fake. It's just the Mandarin's not real.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I am curious about too is because I have heard rumors in the past that they are going to introduce the actual 10 rings in, like that, what that organization looks like. So I'm like, how they're going to write that is just like, okay, well,
there's no organization in the comics. It's just that he has 10 rings, and this was a cool way to be like,
there is no organization in the comics.
No,
I really thought there was. From some
no, it's he has 10 rings, and that was a cool way of like using iconography from the Mandarin in the movie. So yeah, there's no
because the Mandarin,
we have seen the 10 Rings organization that's all throughout the MCU. If there is, it's because of the movies, but the idea is that they made it for the movies.
Fair enough. Yeah, this take on the Mandarin, obviously I have a lot of feelings about, and a lot of good feelings about, because I prefer this over what would have been the comic accurate version, which is definitely a racist trope. So to me, and like a lot of these racist tropes are being dismantled by the MCU, and I really, really, really do appreciate that. In this situation, this is just a really great opportunity to just see Ben Kingsley really flex his acting chops for that fun character.
Yeah,
like, I really like what he does there. Really good. Like when he goes back into Trevor mode, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. It's just such a good shock and departure from what you're really, really building up. And whether or not that's like, and I think the ultimate question is whether or not Aldrin Killage really sets himself up for that big of a threat compared to what the Mandarin is. And I think that's where the swap around feels like it's just like, that's where you feel a little bit cheated, or at least I feel a little bit cheated. It was the idea of like, okay, Aldrin is like the leader or whatever. He is that. He created the front of facade. He created the whole idea of the media angle of it, and I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. But he's not convincingly like that crazy to me in the end, despite even the fact that Tony is throwing everything he's got literally at him. It's just not convincing to me at that point. I don't know why it is, but it's just he didn't succeed as a villain to me.
I think you're not looking at it. I think you're looking at it in a vacuum.
I am looking at it.
Yeah, the point of the movie is that he had been doing everything up until that point. So if you're thinking about like Whiplash or whatever, the Mickey Rourke character, if you're thinking about like Ironmonger, from like all of that is Aldrin Killian. So it's not, oh, what did he do just in this movie? It's the realization that night in 1999 when he was left on the building led to basically everything that Tony Stark has had to deal with that we've seen in this cinematic universe. That's for other than the aliens, like other than the Avengers stuff, which we can acknowledge as a sidestep, but like for the 3 Iron Man movies, that's all closing out, and you've seen the reveal of what the 10 rings and like what all of that has been leading to is this person that's like, you screwed me over once, and like I created all of this to get back at you.
I think the motivation of that just, I don't know. It's what are your thoughts about this? Because the one thing I think about this movie is that it doesn't succeed in that regard. Killian doesn't succeed in that regard of being like, oh, wow, he really is that crazy of a threat and mastermind and all this kind of stuff. It, like, I get that, like that is the connection that they're making, but it doesn't, to me, he doesn't succeed at it. Versus the idea, what this movie does succeed though at a lot for me is the PTSD, the anxiety attacks, all that stuff, the internal stuff that Tony, like that's what really succeeds at this in this movie for. And it's one of those great things that I think at the time seeing the movie of Iron Man 3, the expectation was more action, more gadgets, more whatever. And this movie is like, no, we're really cementing the idea that Iron Man is Tony Stark without the suits even. And because they commit to spending so much of the movie with him outside of the suit and showing the world like exactly what he can do, even with like Rona purchases or whatever. And it's really, really great. I really enjoy that aspect of the movie. But Killian,
I think that's what's wrong with the movie. Because the movie is being like, he's Iron Man outside of the suits, but that's a bad thing because all he's doing is thinking about Iron Man stuff. And so the movie ends with like him blowing it all up, but then him still saying, well, one thing you can't change is I am Iron Man. And it's like, well, then what were we doing?
That part is stupid.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you're saying it works, but I'm like, it's confusing. It's the same thing as, oh, we wanted you as Tony Stark. We didn't want you as Iron Man. And it's like this weird thing that I understand they think they're closing off a storyline, but it's like he's going to continue to be Iron Man this whole time. So a lot of this is, I think, and I'm not saying you're wrong for liking it, but I think everything you like is the stuff I'm thinking like it doesn't really factor in after the fact. It's like, it's nice to see him have the PTSD and that's good, but I think that's as far as it goes for me. I don't think that his storyline works in terms of him letting go of the Iron, because then next time you see him is Age of Ultron and he's still like tinkering and needs all these robots and then I need to put an armor around the world. Like, so it doesn't make sense to me that like,
so no, you're right.
Where he ends here doesn't set you up for Age of Ultron.
No, it doesn't. But at the same time, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. For all of these movies, you can't take them in a vacuum. Like, that is the function of the MCU. It is one long story. So
of course I get that. But in that one long story, to have an episode where he is exploring these kind of things a little bit more successfully, I do like it.
It's not successful because
you're right. The whole story arc for him caps off at Endgame, where he does get to rest, right? So it's just like from now until then, there's so much story. But to have him at least in this story come to the peace aspect of the PTSD with what he dealt with and have that confidence. And I don't know if it was just like this really, really weird misstep in writing of like, let's do the clean slate program and then have him still identify as Iron Man and go forward as Iron Man. Like that to me is like, yeah, that's really weird to write.
Yeah.
But the whole exploration of the PTSD, his anxiety and all that kind of stuff, that to me was fantastic.
But what do you think they explored? Like they showed it, but what did he like? What steps do you feel like? And I don't mean in real life. Like I don't mean realistically. I'm aware it's a movie, but like in this movie, like yes, they show it, and I think that's very strong and it's good. But like I don't know what the movie does to be like, oh, and this is why he's at peace with it.
Well, I mean, that's a fair enough point. It's his therapy is a different kind of thing. Maybe it's just him getting his groove back. Maybe this is Iron Man gets his groove back more than anything else in the sense where
I understand though, but I'm saying I don't know what happens in the movie that gives him his groove back.
Well, his rediscovery of the therapeutic side of everything, which is weird. You're right. It is weird because it's revealed that he's been tinkering on all these things as a form of distraction. And then he tinkers on things again as a form of therapy. So it's like the Batman 3, like the Dark Knight Rises thing, where it's like he's doing things very, very similarly. He's just like, it's similar in that sense where he's just like, I'm doing things, but for the same thing, but for different purposes. And that's really weird. You're right. But I just, the one good part I like pulling out of this movie is that exploration of the PTSD part. You're right in the sense where I don't think he deals with it quite successfully.
Yeah, I don't think it's exploring so much as just
showing.
Like you're demonstrating that he has PTSD. And I agree with you. That's really cool that they wouldn't just have him shake that off. Like it's not like he can this is the first time I noticed that when he signs that thing for the girl, he's asking for help. It says, Aaron, please help me. Like it's not like he's not just having a good time with it. Like he keeps asking, like, how come like it's over, but I don't have any answers. Like I don't they just came and we beat them, but this doesn't work. And the movie is a lot of him being like, but like I know science, so science should just work, and like this should just work. But I don't know that like anything is done to have me believe like, oh, this is why he like comes out okay at the end of it. If you're bringing it up, that should be a more long-term discussion, or like that should go into more than just till the end of this movie, because I don't feel anything happens that like fixes his problem. And I mean the stuff he vocalizes, let alone stuff we can see as an audience. Right,
but like I said, that nothing will fix this problem until Endgame. What, like, to me, the thing is, I don't think you can fully fix this problem. But the idea of like getting his groove back, I think, is a better way of putting it, in the sense where he's like, okay, to regain that confidence that I can use these skills to solve a problem again. Something that's inherently big. I think what this...
But like he did solve the problem. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Like he's worried that like his PTSD comes from like, what the hell, there's aliens? That's fucked.
Yes.
And like, but he still used his skills to solve the problems in Avengers, just the same way he used his skills to solve the problem in this movie. So his problem isn't he doesn't know how to solve problems. His problem is, I'm so worried that something's going to come back again. Which does lead into Age of Ultron, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think anything is solved in this, and I don't mean that as in like he cured his PTSD, but like for him to have peace at the end, which the movie is trying to tell you he does have. I don't understand how they got there, other than just showing that he's not as stressed out anymore.
I mean, that is fair, and it doesn't even show him that he's that stressed out. It just shows that he's. I mean, in terms of the moving on part or whatever, getting the shrapnel out of his chest and all that kind of stuff, sure, but that's symbolic, of course. But again, you're right. It just keeps coming back to this, in the sense where even in Infinity War, Pepper's like, well, why did you do this again? And all this kind of stuff, tapping on his chest. Is like, why did you do this? Like, he keeps
don't get me wrong. I understand that the character will always want to be Iron Man. What I'm saying is,
correct.
For this movie to work better for me, I need to have a better understanding of like how he got over that hump, because nothing happens that's like, oh, I see, he's just looking at it in a different way now. because
Right.
as an audience member, I could still be like, oh, but he's still always going to be want to be Iron Man, and that's going to be his problem, and
Mhm.
that he can't rest.
Yeah.
I can see that, but I still need to see like why the character doesn't see what I see.
Mm. I get
That's
what
what
you
I'm saying. So you keep giving examples of like, oh, it doesn't end till Iron Man or Infinity War. Ever. I understand that. What I'm saying is, in this movie, to be, it's kind of why like I don't understand why everyone shits on Iron Man 2 so much, because this Iron Man 3 movie is also just like a link. It's not like
It is
isn't
definitely a Link movie.
it
It's not
isn't
accomplishing
a
much.
yeah, like it's not a beginning, middle, end necessarily. Like other than the fact of like, oh, like he thought there was a Mandarin, not really a Mandarin, and it's ending. Even if you're just saying it's a link from the first two movies
Yeah.
to
I
now,
mean,
but it
the
like
only thing the only thing it really does is like the ghost of the past that's haunted him is closed, but that chapter is insignificant compared to the chapter that was just open in
exactly.
Avengers,
And he
right?
didn't even
I
know
get
that there
that.
was a ghost haunting him. Like he's
Yeah,
genuinely like, who is this? Like I don't know who
it
this is.
was it was so insignificant. It was like it didn't never even dawned or occurred to him
Hmm.
that it was like, oh, maybe someone's framing me or sabotaging me or anything like that. No, it was never an occurrence. It's like, and that's what I mean. Like Killian doesn't succeed because it just doesn't like give that sense of like, oh, you
I
actually
think
did.
Killian works for an audience member. I think he works.
Hmm.
I understand why people wanted more out of him, but I think
Yep.
because this movie is so deeply rooted in making connections and rounding things out, I
Mhm.
understand what is important about him. I like that it's a pivot of like the whole thing is you thought there was this big bad that you could stop, but the real problem is you. And I think that's thematically it works poetically. It's
Mhm.
the whole point is he is his own problem. He's never going to be at peace because he keeps thinking about things. And
Mhm.
so that reveal of Killian is you thought there was some external issue, but you caused this when you left me out there. And I've been doing all of this to you the whole time. And now I'm coming in for the close. And no, he has to lose because he's the bad guy. But the whole point is like, no, like there isn't some like outside thing you're going to beat that's going to
Mhm.
fix your problem.
Mhm.
So no, that's not the Mandarin's not your issue. And that's why I think he works. That's why I think it's good writing. Um, but like I can understand a comic book fan being like, well, what the hell? That's where's the Mandarin? So that in that
Mhm.
sense, yeah, I get why he doesn't work. But I think if you're thinking about what's actually happening in this movie, it works very well, and it's actually a really nice way of telling that story.
I agree that the writing in this movie is strong in that sense where it does find a way to cap off all three and link all three together. I just it, there's just so much in this movie that doesn't that gets fumbled for me.
Like what else?
Um, it, I don't know. It's just a weird movie. Like the writing is good. I objectively get that. It's just there's so much of this movie that's just I guess it's just a slower pace in this movie that really drags things out for me. But I don't know. It is definitely it's definitely a when I originally wanted this movie in 2013, I didn't expect this. And revisiting it, I do like it. But you're right, of all those criticisms, in the sense where it is a bridging movie, even more so than Iron Man 2. If people are going to be like, yeah, it's a setup for Avengers, or Iron Man 2 is going to set up for Avengers, then I'm like, this is a setup for literally the rest of the MCU in
Mm-hmm.
that regard of like, it's kind of like this movie is saying we're done with these smaller level threats. Iron Man's going to be dealing with the bigger stuff now. When it comes to Ultron, Civil War, all those kind of, it's a really, it's I don't know, it's interesting. It's an interesting way of saying we are done with the Iron Man solo centric stories because he obviously doesn't get like any more trilogies or any like Iron Man 4 or anything like that. But the way he shows up is progressing his storyline in such a really interesting way,
Yeah.
and it's the off-screen writing that they do with Iron Man after this movie that's really interesting. But this movie itself, I think it does it do it's tasked with the job of saying like we're done with the solo Iron Man movie and then setting him up for the bigger universe of it all too. Does it succeed at that for you?
I don't see it as that's what they're trying to do, because I don't think they were trying to cut off the Solo stuff. I don't think that's a smart business play. I think that's how it ended up happening, but that's not what I think they were trying to do. So yeah, it's not something I considered, because I'm like, I heard all the rumors like, oh, they want Mel Gibson to do Iron Man 4. Like, I think if they could have, they would have done an Iron Man 4.
Yeah, maybe it was just a business decision in the sense where RDJ's paycheck was just getting way too big at that point.
There's probably that, but I think they also realized like, oh, like this is a better way of telling the story, like moving forward. I think they just changed their mind, but I don't think this was seen as like this is going to be the last Solo thing, because like, you can see like I don't think they were going to do a Thor 4, but then Thor Ragnarok worked out really well, and they're like,
yeah,
here we are. There's like Thor Love and Thunder, and I don't think they plan on ever being like, oh, we're going to definitively close off that. So yeah, I think it just depends on like, and obviously Chris Hemsworth is a lot cheaper to work with than Robert Downey Jr. at this point.
Yes, at this point.
So yeah, I think it's a mix of all of that. But for me, I think, as I said, I don't really feel strongly about the movie. I think Killian is the strongest part of it. I think that everything I like about it has to do with the switch out for who the Mandarin is, which is why I don't like that they're bringing the real Mandarin, because I like the idea of like, oh, like the Mandarin to most people is Iron Man's Joker. Like that's pretty much the only Iron Man villain I knew going into it. And so to make it like that, like I'm like, oh, that makes sense to me, that it's like this person that has put all their efforts into fucking him over and torturing him. And it's not just some mystical Asian person that like represents what America was afraid of at the time. Like I like all of that, but I like in the movie like the reasoning for it and the poetry of it. So I think that all works for me, because then you get really fun stuff with Trevor Slattery. But you do get like these moments like, hey, did you know that fortune cookies aren't Chinese, they're American, that's why they're hollow, and like, which explains him, like this American creation that's supposed to be somewhat Asian, and like, but there's nothing to him really. I really like all of that stuff. I think it's really cool. That's what works for me. I don't like the War Machine Iron Patriot stuff at all. It seems like
that stuff is
in the face. I'm just like, he doesn't get a suit in the last day. Like, that's what I loved about Iron Man 2, when they're fighting together with their suits. And then their big idea for the third one is like, I don't know, just make him the butt of all the jokes. And then he just has to, like, it's nice for Don Cheadle because he gets more screen time. But I don't want to be watching a whole set piece being like, I guess this is good for the actor. Like, I want to like actually be happy for the characters.
I agree. I think Rhodey gets the shaft here a lot, and he gets the way I wanted to see what he was dealing with in this was a constant conflict for how he has to serve his military, in the sense where they're asking him to do unethical things and things he doesn't want to do and all that kind of stuff, things he doesn't agree with. I think that's a very interesting part, but it gets shafted so much. Like, I wanted to see more of that. And then, but the idea of like him figuring that out, but it never really does. And it's just until he just kind of breaks off with Iron Man and does his own thing, that he just kind of succeeds at, and it looks competent and all that. He does get shit on in this movie quite a bit. In his character, and it's not fun to watch. But the one thing that is fun to watch is the idea that like his password is still recognizing. He's like, no, I'm still I'm War Machine, and he's like, the funny part is like, oh, it's a rebranding thing. Like, he's like, you can tell he's like kind of on board, but not really. And then like internally, like left to his own devices, he's like, War Machine rocks. And I'm like, this is the best thing. That's really, really fun. That's just such a fun part of the movie. I'm like, yeah, that's the only part I like, up until the part where he just kind of breaks free and does it with Tony. But it never really succeeds as that's a really purely his decision kind of thing, versus more, this is what the circumstance requires. kind of issue. So yeah, he doesn't get written well here. And this movie again doesn't do a good job of convincing me that they're friends. It really doesn't do a good job of convincing me that they're friends.
I think this one, I believe they're friends in this.
It does a better job than two, I think. Well, definitely than one, because one, he's shitting on him all the time. But like this one, it does do a better job out of all three of them for sure. But it's funny.
Yeah,
but Rhodes does get shit on.
I actually do think they're friends in this one. I think it's the last time they seem like they're actually friends instead of just people that work together.
Right.
Like I like their like banter while they're like when they're both out of the suits, and it's kind of like, well, what did you see? And he's like, I didn't see anything. I went too quickly up, and it's like Rhodey has to take control of that situation because he's like, you can't shoot at a light bulb, and then Rhodey just gets up and takes out the light bulb, and he's like, all right, yeah, fine.
Yeah, that is great. That look that he gives him is like,
but
yeah, you know what? That is
genuinely
very
concerned about him as well, like when he has his freak out at the restaurant, but also when he calls him when he's trying to do Iron Patriot stuff, and like the smile on his face when he's like, oh, it's Tony, like, and he kind of just forgets about what he's doing there. I think this movie actually does do a good job of showing
you're
friends. Right. I think it's just bad at showing Rhodey as an individual. Like, it's nice that he's friendly with Tony, and I appreciate a movie actually showing them be friends, but that's the Shane Black of it, right? Like, Shane Black's great at doing buddy movies, like that's his thing. So it makes sense that this one does a good job of showing me them being buddies.
That is fair.
But yeah, I don't like it for Rhodey as a superhero, because obviously, like, next time you see him as Age of Ultron, it's like he's who they call in to like help out at the end. He's like the third heat type thing, and it's like, okay, but like you just made him a joke in the last movie, so like why did we put that hurdle there?
Yeah, he's the butt end of the joke of a lot of things in the MCU. I mean, like even in the like Ultron movie, where they're
boom, were you looking for this? And they're like,
boom, were you looking for this?
Story?
And then Thor's like, oh, that's a very good War Machine story. Yes,
but that's what I like in Age of Ultron, is that it is him being like, oh, like maybe I should just like take like he recognizes how he's seen, and like he's unsatisfied now.
Yeah, and then he does join in the end, and I do love that. It's great, but and that is fantastic for the character. But then, and boy, does it ever suck that he's the one that gets crippled in Civil War, right? Like that part sucks.
I think it only sucks because they don't consistently show how close he is to Tony, because the point is like, Steve has Bucky, and you're supposed to be like, oh, and this is Tony's Bucky, but they don't ever seem as close as Steve and Bucky. So it just it just feels like, oh, I guess he got crippled, instead of what I understand that to mean, which is like, oh, this is a mistake Tony made, that like it's not like, and I don't think, oh, he would just forget about someone who died, but it's like a living, breathing mistake he has to deal with, like, and reckon with for the rest of time. Like he'll always remember, like, oh shit, like this is what my ambition did to my friends. So I like that. It's just, it would be better if you felt that like that was someone he cared about.
Yes,
to that extent.
And this movie, you're right. I misspoke, because this movie, you're right. You remind me of all the moments that it does make it feel like, yes, this is the one that does the most legwork to show them that they are friends, and they have those friend moments and all that kind of stuff. Like that, like shooting the light thing is like by far one of the best moments of that friendship.
Yeah, I like that scene up until the suits come, and I'm like, he seriously can't get a suit? Like, what's
and that
like,
suit,
why does that happen?
Yeah, and then especially because it's like in Iron Man 2, he just goes and gets the suit, and I don't know. Oh, well, it does make sense that he would upgrade security features after.
No,
whatever. But still, it does suck for him.
All of the movies show that like he learns from the mistake from the last movie. So this time when he's like, okay, give me a suit, he's like, well, they're all coded to me. yeah, that's making up for like now people can't steal my suits.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you knew you were going there. You could have
Yeah.
figured something out for a War Machine suit.
Yeah. And then the
Like,
alternative,
it
because the
even would have
alternative
been
thing is
him
like,
reclaiming War Machine. Like, yeah, that Iron Patriot stuff is stupid. Let them keep that, and then
Yeah.
bring in a War Machine suit that Rhodey could use.
but also because Pepper gets in suits too. Albeit though that Tony
Not at that point. No, she does at the beginning, and that was to save her. But
yes, that I get that, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's like you do have exceptions to the rule. You just didn't make Rhodes an exception. And that's the part.
I don't think that's what's happening. I think that the House Party protocol was specifically suits coded to him. So those are the only suits that were there. Because then at one point that Mark 46 suit comes back. He's like, oh, like the prodigal son returns. But at that point, that you need that to circle it. You can't put that on Rhodey. But like that was the suit that what's her face was able to, the Pepper Potts was able to use earlier. And yes, conceivably Rhodey could have too, but I don't think any of those other suits were suits other people could use.
Right, fair enough. But I do appreciate how you use that that final suit in the sense where you're like, this is a suit that's been damaged and screwed up the whole time. You can't tell me just because it's been charged, oh, that's how he's using it. Cool, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? It's just like the entire time they're like, the weapons aren't online. The only thing is the repulsors, and that's technically, arguably, whether or not that's a weapon is just because it's like it's a repulsor lift. That's it. But it's not like the missiles or everything he usually has, and then he uses it to blow him up. And I'm like, that's great. That's great. I like that. It was fun. But then the head scratching does begin with the clean slate protocol. That is a part of the movie that bothers me quite a bit. Because it bothered me. He just, you're right. He just goes back. He's like, cool, you did the symbolic thing. You threw the heart shrapnel thing in the ocean where your house died because you didn't need it anymore. But then you took the robot that you always shit on all the time through every single movie that you're like, hey, you suck. This robot sucks. And like goes and lays the seeds that he's gonna do more Iron Man stuff. So it doesn't.
I mean,
that
that's
last
the
part
thing.
he just sucks.
He says that, but like, if I'm supposed to feel like the character thinks they're better, he would be like, I'm Tony Stark. He wouldn't say I'm Iron Man. Yeah. Iron Man was something he made out of trauma and like needed to fix something.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't feel like, and again, I get that the audience can feel like he's not better. That's fine. It's just that the character thinks he's better. And I'm like, I don't know. Like what's made you think you're better?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know how well the PTSD plays out, like all of that plays out. I think it's good that it's there because in addition to just being like, well, everything counts in these movies. These aren't just like one-offs. But it is also just like the first time that you're like, oh, like look at the toll this takes on someone, not just physically. Like this is like this guy can't sleep anymore. Like he's questioning himself. So it's good that they show it. I just am like, I don't know like where that goes, other than it's the end of the movie, so he's better now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy thing to bring up and then just be like, yeah, we fixed it, don't worry about it.
You're right, it doesn't successfully actually tell us how he's dealt with it in a way other than like, oh, I'm reframing what tinkering means and all that kind of stuff.
I don't, and maybe that's not for us to know, but I don't really know how he feels he reframed it.
Right. That's fair.
But yeah, so there's that.
The one thing I will say about this movie too is when I was it just you or when they brought AIM into the picture in this movie that I started thinking of, I think a lot of theories out there too about like the possibility of MODOK coming into the MCU or super adaptoids or stuff like that, where it's, you know, AIM has created this machine that learns all the Avengers fighting tactics and all that, and they have to take that down, and that's like I don't know, stuff like that. I got really excited for the idea of that, and then Aldrin Killiach is just gone here. So I don't like, but that was one of the things that I thought would be really, really great once I was like, oh my god, AIM's being introduced into this. So it just, yeah, that was just one of the fun things that Easter eggs, I guess, or
Yeah, I
story
mean,
possibilities I thought it could have gone, but I guess I don't know whether or not they could bring it back, but MODOK would be kind of cool in the future with.
yeah, I don't know
But
why they wouldn't be able to.
yeah,
That like that makes sense to me. Like, okay, Killian's gone now, and now there's
Yeah.
like a new leader, and it's MODOK or whatever.
well, the new leader would be like Monica. I forget what her name is, and then that was one of my things here is like with Rebecca Hall's character,
Maya Hansen.
Maya Hansen. I was just like, oh man, that could have been a good opportunity to cast her as Monica. What's her name?
Well,
from
I
AIM.
think the point with
And that
AIM,
would have been
they're
kinda
not
cool.
that exceptional. Like, it's not like they aren't
Mhm.
like they aren't like the colorful like that's why you have a MODOK. So it's like here's the fun like visual, but like they are pretty like faceless
Yeah.
people in general. That's kind of the
Mhm.
AIM thing. So I don't know that you would want to like because it's the MCU and you can take liberties. I don't know that you'd be like, let's pin it on this like
Mhm.
normal person. Like you would probably be like, yeah, and like now they've got a MODOK, and that's their MO now. Is like
Mhm.
getting him off the ground and running.
Because there's obviously different versions of AIM and all that kind of stuff. I do like how they wrote it here, but it's one of those things where I'm like, hopefully this does mean that a MODOK could be created at some point in the future, because that would be kind of cool.
I mean, it's weird because I know they're doing the MODOK TV show.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think we've seen that. Like, if something's on TV, and it's not going to be on Disney Plus, so that also kind of means like I don't know if they're going to touch that in the movies.
Yeah, that I don't whether or not that means MCU is a different story, but yeah, that it's just a weird thing. Is like, will that MODOK be linked to this AIM, or is
He can't
like
because that show is like a comedy, and it's like Patton
I get
Oswalt, and
that.
he's got a kid.
Yeah.
So like, no, he won't be linked.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it's also
MODOK
like a specific
itself
style. It's like claymation and stuff. So like, no.
Oh, is it really claymation?
Yeah.
That's fun. Because MODOK stands for mental organism designed only for killing. It's such a fun abbreviation.
Yeah.
MODOK.
What else? So I guess we haven't really said what happens in this movie other than he gets better at the end. But like,
well, we're told he gets better at the end.
Yeah. One thing I didn't really, I guess, figure out. I guess I just wasn't paying attention. It's not one of the ones I've revisited because, as I said, I really don't care one way or the other about this movie. But like, I didn't realize what was happening was anytime an extremist soldier blew up, they blamed it on the Mandarin. Like that's how they were explaining it away. Oh, that's an interesting.
You didn't like that, or you like that?
No, I didn't notice it until this viewing.
Oh.
I thought they were just things that were happening, and then for some reason, then the Mandarin would claim like he did something, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's a nice. Like I just thought like, oh, that shows how much Killian thinks about things. It's like we are doing this thing, and then how do we explain away these explosions? Like, oh, let's make up this other villain over here, and then people will start. It's why it takes Iron Man so long to figure out what's going on, because he's looking for a bomb the whole time, because he's thinking, oh, this terrorist group is bombing places, and it's like that's smart. Yeah. I think that's really well done.
I think it's very, very smart the way they did that. It's just because it's him spinning the truth in different ways. That is, and Iron Man's like, no, it's got to be a bomb, and all this kind of stuff. It's really, really interesting to show him going through that detective part, figuring it out what he's trying to do, without Jarvis and without his AI and his tech and all that kind of stuff. That is very, very interesting, but still needing the help of that little kid.
Harley.
That little kid.
Yeah, I like that kid.
That kid's fun. I like that he's just like, I didn't do anything. I didn't even talk about it this time. It's a funny little interaction, all that kind of stuff. It's interesting that he's revealed that he has a 3-picture deal with Marvel, though. That actor. I thought that was a very interesting thing that he's just publicly stated. I have a 3-picture deal. I'm like, What did you think your character was going to go? It seemed like a character that served a purpose.
Yeah, I just feel like most people get multiple picture deals. That's how you lock people in and don't have to pay them that much.
No, that's okay. That's fair.
I don't
Yeah, in
like,
case they it keeps everything open. for
like
them
there's
wanting to
certain
do it.
people that yeah, like when Sebastian Stan says I have a little 11 picture deal, I'm like that makes sense. You're not just Bucky, but you're a Winter Soldier. But if some like
Yeah.
kid is like I have a 3 picture deal, it's like okay, great, and they've used 2 of them up already. Like, you didn't even get a line in your second one, so like great. Like okay, cool. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't care. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything to me other than good. You locked them in at a certain rate.
Mhm.
If you need them, you need them. But yeah, I thought that was cool. I like the Killian stuff. I think that's what saves the movie for me is that whole like sleight of like not sleight of hand, but like the bait and switch, and that like it wasn't ruined for me the first time I saw it, that I got to actually just experience it. And then the implications, and I guess why I don't like it is it's like, oh well, he really is a real thing. So why did they use that name, and how did they never like get in trouble for it before? Like yeah, like they just get away with being able to like use that person's name, and it seems like he's supposed to be powerful. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully they just don't talk about it in Shang-Chi. I'm hoping it's just like, yeah, this is the Mandarin, and it won't be a white man beating up an Asian guy if he gets beat up in that movie. We can at least have it be Asian people on equal footing on that sense.
Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna do that. That is one thing that's weird to me is that they did indicate that they're gonna bring the Mandarin to Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I mean, they wrote it this way, and then it feels like they're going back on it.
Yeah,
You know,
I
it feels
think
like
this is I think it's the best way to bring in the Mandarin if you're like feeling like you owe the audience something. I thought that was a perfectly good way of framing it. Of like, it won't be like the Asian scare of like, oh no, Americans are afraid of Asian, but like this will be based on the cast. I don't know what the actual execution would be. It's like a more even if it's Asian American focused film, so like it won't feel like, oh, they made Killmonger the bad guy, so that's white guys like beating up on it. It's like, well, that was all within them, and Killmonger represented a different point of view of black people. Like I like the idea of having like not treating these ethnicities as monoliths. So like they have an Asian villain, but you have like an Asian hero, and you've got Asian side characters. I feel like that would, and I'm only saying Asian because who knows where they'll be from in the movie. I don't want to.
No, I mean Asian's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I don't want to stick to like specifically East Asian. I don't want to stick to a country and have that be wrong. But like,
yeah, of course.
That's what I'm saying. Like the black characters in Black Panther, I appreciated. Like it's fine to have a black villain in that because I'm like, yeah, like he's representing a point of view that like some people may have. Like, and so that to me feels better than like all white hero and then like has to beat a minority. So if you want to use all the stuff from Mandarin, hopefully they don't get too crazy with it. But if you want to use that iconography and actually use the Mandarin, I feel like Shang-Chi is the best place to do it based on what they have available to them in the MCU.
That is true.
On this story that they did that I thought was a good way of talking yourself out of the Mandarin.
It is. I do appreciate the fact that they've casted Tony Leung as the Mandarin because he's one of my favorite like Asian actors because he just does the original Infernal Affairs so well, and he's such a great actor. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with the Mandarin role and like how they are going to tackle that. But it's just one of those things where I just don't know what's going to happen there. And I know I'm not excited for it, but I know it's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's just, if it's one thing that I can only be excited for after the fact. If I'm like, oh, okay, I approve of that. They did a really, really good job. That was very smart. It's not something I'm like, I'm looking forward to how they do this.
Mhm.
because I'm just like, it's still awkward to me. They handled it already with the Aldrin Killiage thing. I'm like, okay, commit to that.
I wish they did
It's like
commit to
now
it.
if you go to the ancient one and if like redoing the ancient one thing and being like, oh, there were versions of the ancient ones that was following that stereotype, and I'm like,
But
that's interesting.
that is what they're saying for.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
For Doctor
I'm
Strange,
just-
it is that like she just is a ancient one. She's not the.
I get it, but like to go back and show the visuals of it on screen is just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you're just kind of like not. It's a soft committal to the thing that you're trying to do, and it seems performative at that point. It's just like, yeah, we're not doing racist stereotypes and iconography and all this kind of stuff for Asians, but then here's the picture of it. It's like, we're not doing it on screen. He's not saying those things, but here's a picture of it anyways, just to make us like people have. I'm like, it seems like a weird half like committal to what they're doing in that for that character within the MCU. It really does, because it's like the Ten Rings were this, and now we have Tony Leung thing, that Mandarin, and Simu Liu in the movie where we're acknowledging the fact that there is the Ten Rings organization. It's just going to be very, very interesting to see what happens.
I think you're confused because you always thought there was like this other 10 rings, but
yes,
the movies are never like, oh, 10 rings isn't real. It's just they were saying the Mandarin as this mystic figure wasn't real until you find out he is. So yeah, I think that's part of the confusion. I also understand just the hesitancy of like, what will the Mandarin look like? How will he perform? So like, yeah, that's all valid. But yeah, I think I have distance from it. So it feels like a better way of doing it if you are like, let's try and get the Mandarin in here. This feels like a better way. But I'm not saying like, oh, so you should be happy about it. I feel like everything you're saying is right. Like that's it. You would be like, ugh, I don't like this. This feels bad.
Yeah, it's just a pass or fail situation to me.
Yeah, I just feel like, oh, like based on the other actors in the movie, based on the director, like hopefully we get something like Black Panther where it feels nuanced and that it's having a discussion about like different viewpoints within a perceived monolith culture.
Yep, I agree. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens out of this movie, but it's still one of those things where I'm like, I just don't know what's going to happen here, and no part of me is actually excited for it. And that's so because I just don't think it's going to be handled well. I don't think it will be. It's just, I don't think it's a Black Panther situation. I don't, and I don't feel like there's a good way of handling that specific thing, especially with what they've done within Iron Man 3, in the sense where I'm like, okay, they've already explained that. Can we just move on? But then
I don't know. I didn't think there was a good way to do Man Ape, and then they made him Baku. Like, I feel like there is a way you can do it properly, and still.
That's fair.
I think
that's very fair. I never even gave that any consideration, because we when we talk about Black Panther, we praise that so well. That we're like,
I think there is a way to do this.
Man Ape. Yeah,
and that's why I'm saying
fair.
It's not like the Mulan movie where it was like this white woman that's directing and who knows who's writing.
Oh,
and
God, the Mulan movie.
But
this is Destin Daniel Cretton,
who is an Asian American director. Yes, granted, but Ryan Coogler is an African American director who was like going through something in terms of what is my connection to that continent, and like going through, like he went through something that made, and I know he didn't write it alone, but like it made for a very rich story. I get that people are just like, oh, it's just some Marvel movie, whatever. But like, if you are, I think it helps if you are closer to it. Like if you are a Black person, you see the effort that was put into telling a rich story about what it is to be Black in different parts of the world and at different classes. And I think Shang-Chi has a similar opportunity to do that with the creative team behind it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting about Shang-Chi is I haven't really recognized how many times they actually tried to bring a Shang-Chi film or television series to the big screen. I mean, they originally tried to do it with Brendan Lee in the 1980s. Obviously, he passed away. We covered that film, obviously, The Crow. You go check that episode back. And then they try to do it with like so many different things. Hands of Shang-Chi by 2003 was a film developed by DreamWorks, and Ong Lee was attached to it, and then Marvel Studios got the right back. So this is going to be interesting. It's I don't know. It's going to be very, very interesting because to me, it's one of those situations where it feels like it's going to be Crazy Rich Asians again, where a lot of people universally like it, but Asians universally hate it. It's just like, who is this movie for? It's by an Asian person for white people, or is it by an Asian person for Asian people? And it's just like, it's a situation that's different, very, very difficult for me, because there is Hong Kong cinema already, and we know what that looks like. And arguably, yes, it has to be different. So what's the in-between merit of that? We don't know. And this is where I'm like, I fumble. But you're right to bring up the Mane M'Baku situation, because that was so successfully done, so well done, that it gives me so much hope, because that is a hugely problematic character in its own right. But to write it the way they did, I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
I actually love that. So I'm really hoping if they could be like, oh, this is the Mandarin, and it was, I don't know what it's going to be. If it was like, oh, well, it was me, the Mandarin, that was funding Killian or something like that. Who do you think gave him the money after Tony Stark said no? All that kind of stuff. That could make sense to me. But
as I said, I hope they don't even mention Iron Man 3.
that's the thing. It's just like
scared for them to try and connect it. Like, we already have that All Hail the King thing. I don't even think I did watch it because it had Scoot McNairy in it. So I was like, yeah, cool. But I do not care for them to touch on this again. And we spent a lot of time talking about a movie that we're not actually reviewing, but it is because
but it's so important because of that iconography of the Mandarin.
As I said, it undoes what I think works about this movie. Is that
yes, and that's what the problem is.
Yeah, it's like, okay,
that's why it's a problem, because it's a soft committal to what this movie is, and that's what it just undoes everything. It's just it's weird. It's such a weird thing.
Shang-Chi doesn't undo it.
Thing.
Shang-Chi doesn't undo it. It's that All Hail the King shot that undoes it.
Fair,
because that's where they were like, oh, but he still exists, and I was like, oh, okay, like. And now Shang-Chi is just like, this is the best place to put him, since this is the character you wanted to like go. This is the first Asian American character you want to lead with.
Because then it could be like another way it could be, and this is just me spitballing or like whatever, pitching or whatever. But it could be a Ra's al Ghul situation. It's like, oh yeah, where the Mandarin is a title, whatever, and Aldrin Killian has had it for a while, and now this guy has it. Yay, that's fun.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, it still undoes it, because the whole point was,
yes,
I created the Mandarin. Like, you were looking. It's what I said. Like, you were looking for some external thing that was going to help you, but that's not what's going to help you. And again, that's why I don't think the ending really works, because it was like, there was no thing he fixed that fixes everything. He still needs, and yes, he undoes the stuff in his chest. So if you wanted to end it on that, cool. But then he goes, I am Iron Man. And you're like, oh, well, never mind. But what I'm saying is,
and it's him saying Iron Man that protects and saves the universe. So what? So it's like, this movie is just, it's a weird movie.
Well, again, Endgame works because it's like, yeah, you're never going to rest because you are Iron Man. We understand that, we accept that, and this is how you go out. You go out saving the world, hopefully creating that safety that you were trying to do all the time. That makes sense. Why this doesn't work is because it doesn't have that ending, and I don't mean that he snaps and saves the world. It's that Endgame is it's like Thanos says, it feels inevitable. That is the inevitable conclusion to Iron Man. But for Iron Man 3, it's like, what? Like, what are we trying? It's a mixed message. It's muddled, and it's like I don't get what.
It's very mixed message. You're right. We don't get like the conclusion for Iron Man 3 is found in Endgame. This movie is weird in many, many regards. Many, many regards. I get that. The one thing I do like, you help me find the words for, is the on-screen not exploration, not
just representation. Yeah.
On-screen portrayal or presentation of PTSD. That was successfully well done to me. It does the treatment or lack of obviously is a fumble. This whole movie ends up being very fumbledy for a lot of different things, but there's certain parts of the movie that work very, very well. You're right. The Aldrich Killian thing you've convinced me is actually a lot better than what it is, but it is what it is. The Mandarin thing to me is still the part of this movie that I enjoy the most. I really enjoy that the most, for sure.
You mean
we didn't get? Yes.
Yeah.
Both those things, but we didn't get a chance to talk about Pepper in this movie.
Yeah. Some might say that wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I'm just pointing that out. It's just still underwhelming of the contribution.
I don't think it's underwhelming. I think it's a good use of her, but I don't know that like there's a ceiling for Pepper Potts, right? Like she's
That's what I mean. We hit the ceiling.
Yeah, and I like seeing her. I like them together. I especially love when it's like her, Maya Hansen, and Tony together. Like she works. I just think she works as a character. It's just if you're looking for her to do more, I don't like. There's no real room for that. If they're not, like she is in this movie. She's got her agency. She's like, I'm moving. Like not moving. It's like I'm leaving. You just fucking put our address on the like out to the world. We're leaving now. That's what a normal person would do. She doesn't like spare his feelings by saying like, oh yeah, great Christmas present. She's like, well, it's certainly a present. Like, and then she said, I don't like it. It's not good. She puts on the suit. She does. It's not like a comedic moment when she's got the suit on. She's motivated, and they don't have it on her for a long enough time for you to be like, how is she doing all that? It's all instinctual stuff that makes sense. She's got a lot to do. I don't know if it's like a matter of, oh, why didn't they use her more? I feel like she's used, and like even in the setup of Damsel in Distress, she's the one that saves him again. Like she has to come out and like knock Killian out.
Interesting.
So I don't know if you felt there was more for her to do. I'm not sure.
There's definitely not more for her to do in this movie. Like you said it perfectly. This character hits its ceiling. The most effective use of this character is like how Tony just like, hey, you run the company for me, and just shows her doing it competently. That's the ceiling. She does everything a normal person would do. A normal person that's not a superhero would do, and that's the problem with. And you said it perfectly. There's a ceiling for this character, and that's it. She's hit it, and we get the extra bonus of her getting in the suit and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm happy for people that like wanted a rescue payoff in Endgame, because that's fantastic. Great job there. But yeah, there's a ceiling here. But I do like the effective use of her after this movie, and everything that they do is like, oh, that's a good reason to bring her in. That's a great reason to bring her in this. I don't
think they waste her at all in this movie.
They do not.
Yeah.
It's just
what we didn't talk about, which I thought was interesting, was Happy being sidelined, and I thought that was very effective.
Yeah.
Like just the fact that they showed him in the hospital with tubes down his throat and stuff. I was like, oh, like this is serious. This isn't like time for jokes. And I like that Tony was in the hospital with him. Like, again, it's all different like styles, but it's like you see the friendship there. Like even when he's like, I miss you, he's like, yeah, I miss you too.
I definitely see the friendship there. Like the idea that he's like, hey, he puts on Downton Abbey for him and all this kind of stuff.
And he tells her what time.
That is a very, very. Yeah,
Sorry,
that's a very, very
Nurse.
sweet
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah,
And that's what basically
it's a
made
very
like,
real
oh,
moment.
I like that it was like that's what got him to the point of like I'm gonna do something reckless now. Like you took it too far, which is pretty American.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like you didn't care when he was doing all these other bombings. I mean, let's just go with the narrative of the movie in terms of Mandarin is real and actually bombing places. Like you didn't really care until it hit your backyard, which is kind of the Pearl Harbor thing of like, no, Hitler's fine. Don't worry about it. Where did he bomb? Okay, now we're coming and we're gonna we will literally nuke the world for this.
Yep. Yeesh.
But yeah, that's
all right.
That's Iron Man 3. I don't care about the president stuff. I don't care about the vice president, but it is
the president stuff
that we are.
I wanted that. You know what? I wanted that. I was watching that part and I was like, oh, I forgot about this president stuff. You know what I would have really, really liked? A Hail Hydra from the vice president. That would have been cool, man.
That wouldn't make sense.
That would have been like, as he's getting arrested, he's like, Hail Hydra. And I'm like, sweet. That would have been cool. But this is wishful thinking on my end. But there's a lot of wishful thinking for me on this end.
You'd be undercutting Winter Soldier if you do that. The whole point is that you're showing
that's fair.
That how far those tentacles go. So if you put it in this movie, it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like I guess we already knew this.
That's true. Maybe there could have been some sort of small Easter egg or something like that. Maybe it was like a Hydra pin or something like that. That would have been fun. I don't know. I'm just wanting this movie to be something that it wasn't. That's just me, and I fully admit that. That's me being like, hey, I wish they wrote Rebecca Hall as Monica instead for more AIM Easter eggs. I clearly am wanting more out of this movie than what it gave me.
But I mean, I guess so. I understand. I think Maya Hansen is a character in the comics, though. But I understand when you're like, oh, why not just give them the name?
That's it. But I mean, but Monica is when Monica does do AIM stuff. It is very, very, very much more competent and much a bigger threat to the Avengers. So we don't know if that's coming yet. Still,
So that's what I'm saying because I'm pretty sure Maya Hansen is a character in the comics, and pretty much that is the arc for her.
I get that. Yeah. It could be a possibility. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Let's rate this.
AIM.
Movie.
Yes. 6.
We'll give it a 7.
It's a 6.
You gave it a 6. I gave it a 7. Excellent.
Yeah.
What a great time at the movies. It was the same. I don't feel strongly about this movie. I know there are people that feel like hurt by this movie. I know there's people who foolishly think it's the best MCU movie. I don't get that. But like for me, I was just like, meh. And I think it's because it came out like not obviously right after, but it was after my disappointment of Dark Knight Rises, and I was just like, who cares anymore? Like, whatever. And it even has a clean slate protocol in it. But like, I was just like, nah. Maybe I was overreacting for Dark Knight Rises because I see a bunch of people mad about this movie, and I feel like they're overreacting. And that's my take. But yeah, that's Iron Man 3. Let us know if we forgot anything. How do you do that? Well, I have a spiel that will let you know how to do that, because we are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network, which means we are at the same home as Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares, What a Great Theme Song, and more. So you can head on over there, thatshelf.com, and see those places and see us. You can also listen to older episodes of Spoiled Rotten at tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our Twitter is at tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, and more. So please go there, rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And, find a way to get in touch with us through that. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers.
This
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.